of the Larger Fellowship, a Unitarian Universalist congregation with no geographical boundaries. We believe in cultivating curiosity and transformation that is rooted in profound love. The COVID-19 pandemic has irrevocably shaped how connections are formed in congregations across the United States and the world. The Church of the Larger Fellowship is committed to being a resource within Unitarian Universalism and beyond. From worship to covenant groups, from classes to pastoral care, and from our monthly magazine Quest to our online community hub and our letter writing ministry. We have found ways to build connection and community, even through the screen. We have been a model for ministry on the margins, providing services for isolated Unitarian Universalists, becoming a spiritual lifeline for our members in prison. The CLF supports the ministries of those who hold target identities: Blue, Black Lives of Unitarian Universalism; Trust, Transgender Religious UU Professionals Together; and Drum, Diverse Revolutionary Unitarian Universalist Multicultural Ministries, just to name a few. We know better than anyone how deep and meaningful connections can be formed, even from a distance. Unitarian Universalists have faced many challenges in these times, and we continue to persevere and fight for justice and equity for all people, especially during moments of crisis. We are proud to be a leader in this faith movement, and we invite you to get involved in our ministry. We strive to be a place where anyone from anywhere can find spiritual refuge anytime they need it. Welcome to the Church of the Larger Fellowship. We are so excited to bring you an all-new episode of The VUU. The VUU is a weekly Unitarian Universalist talk show discussing important faith-based topics from an anti-racist, anti-oppressive, and multicultural perspective. Every Thursday for the past 7 years, we have welcomed guests from every corner of the world. Our guests are writers, scholars, activists, and religious thought leaders who are shaping Unitarian Universalism and society for the 21st century and beyond. I hope today's show inspires you. Hope it builds your faith. Hope it gives you perspective to see the power of Unitarian Universalism at work in your life. Enjoy the message.
Greetings, beloved. Welcome to the Voices of Unitarian Universalism, also known as the VUU, sometimes the VUU, though we miss Kiana Dene Perkins, who called it that. We hope that she'll be back on sometime soon. Viewers, we are hurtling toward the end of season 11 of this show. This is episode 429 today, and just to prepare yourself, we take a summer hiatus. The last episode of season 11 will take place at the Unitarian during the Unitarian Universalist General Assembly at the end of June. And I was going to say at the Unitarian Universalist General Assembly, which is technically true, since the Unitarian Universalist General Assembly is entirely virtual and will be taking place in all of our homes and offices, where we attend it by computer this June. And so we will be broadcasting a special mid-GA episode that will not conflict with any General Assembly programming, and also our special annual worship service will also be happening at General Assembly. If you want to know more, look to our Facebook page and our YouTube page in the coming days and weeks to know more about our annual GA worship service that will also be taking place during the General Assembly from our homes and our offices all around the globe. I'm the Reverend Dr. Michael Tino. I'm 1/3 of the lead ministry team of the Church of the Larger Fellowship, and I am coming to you from Peekskill, New York, the land of the Kitchewan and Wappinger peoples, a little bit north of New York City. And folks, there is weather today. Lucretia Williams, who is right across the Hudson River from me, is getting the thunderstorms first. But they are coming here, and I sent my poor child to the bus stop this morning And I put her in a rain jacket because the the skies were looking gray, and by the time she got to the bus stop, it was coming down harder than I have almost ever seen it rain. There were reports of inch and a half
Oh my gosh.
uh, large hail in the area, and my poor child was at the bus stop in her little rain jacket. I mean, at least she was in a very good rain jacket, so she was dry under it. But I ran out in the rain and I drove up to the bus stop just as the bus was pulling up, and she was huddled with her little friends under umbrellas. It was the cutest thing you ever saw. Um, so that's the weather here. Thunderstorms here in the northeastern United States, and the hopefully they didn't damage the peonies in the garden, which are just starting to bloom. Because as soon as the peonies bloom, there's going to be a thunderstorm, and they're all going to be all over the sidewalk.
It's law.
Aisha Hauser, how are you?
It's how it is. I am Aisha Hauser. I am on the land of the Coast Salish people, also known as Seattle, Washington, on the entire other coast of where Michael is. I am the second third of the lead ministry team of the Church of Larger Fellowship, and our third, Christina Rivera, is not with us today. It is light gray here in Seattle. So I've been here, which I can't even believe, 10 and a half years. Truly cannot believe it. Because I'm an East Coaster through and through, but I'm here 10 and a half years, and maybe 3 times in 10 years has it been not drizzle and like a lot of rain. It's not, I actually haven't seen it as alarming as what you're describing. I've only seen that on the East Coast and when I lived in South America, but here today, light gray, and we're getting ready for June is next week. We get January here in Seattle, which is so the beginning of May, end of April, we get bright sun, and it's like, oh, here's what spring could look like if that's a thing we did here in the Northwest. And then June comes along, and other people have summer everywhere in the world, and we get January, so we get cold, rain. We're still, wearing the not so light raincoats. And I will tell you, when summer comes, this is I've lived in 5 different states and 3 different countries. This is the most beautiful place I've ever lived. So for all the whining I do about the gray days here in Seattle, it is absolutely stunning when it is nice and bright and sunny. It is just magical. So I need a minute to bitch before we start about Palestine, about what's happening in Palestine and the genocide that our current president says is not a genocide, but it is. Benjamin Netanyahu, who is the organizer of this genocide, the president of Israel, or prime minister, whatever he is, came on our TV and called our children, our babies who are protesting, killing babies and murder and genocide, called them terrorists. And our politicians were clapping for him, and we have so become upside down as a society. And it is our people in power. So I want to just make sure our society actually, and I would say if we started counting numbers, most people in the United States are against the genocide. I believe that with my heart and soul. Our children, the majority of them are against it, as evidenced by what's happening on college campuses. And yet the people in power are really, really doubling down on the horror, and they're doubling down on attacking our children. And there are families that are being broken apart about this, and all in the name of saying, stop murder, stop genocide, stop what's happening. And then, we learn about it. So I just, none of us are free until all of us are free. That is not an empty statement. And the thing is, we're sowing the seed. We know that empire is going to fall. This is not hyperbole. It's a matter of time, because what the world, too many people now know, right? Too many people know that what's happening in Gaza is kind of a dry run of how empire wants to continue to oppress the world, because Black and brown people have never stopped resisting. That's never been a thing. And now we have social media, and now we are talking to each other. So prayers for those of us who want peace and an end to occupation, an end to imperialism. My prayers with Congo, Sudan, Palestine, Haiti. We haven't talked about that. So that's my world roundup, and praying so much prayers. So thank you, Michael. That's
Thank you.
end of rant.
So we're doing a world roundup at the beginning of the show today. We usually do the UU roundup and talk about what's going on in Unitarian Universalism, but we are doing a world roundup because our entire show is going to be about what's happening in Unitarian Universalism right now. It's flipped. We've flipped the view too. And so let me introduce our guest, and we'll just launch into a conversation.
Yes.
We are excited to have with us the Reverend Dr. Cindy Landrum, who is the minister of First Parish of Stowe and Acton in Massachusetts. Cindy has been deeply involved in the issues surrounding the proposed revisions to Article 2 of the UUA bylaws, which again is the most boring way to say the central part of our faith that holds us together as Unitarian Universalists, right? Cindy has been a co-administrator of a Facebook group where people have been working on amendments to that together. And she is also a member of the Commission on Social Witness, which shepherds the action of immediate witness process and also the congregational study action process, but that's not relevant at this GA. And we'll get to talking about actions of immediate witness too. So welcome, Cindy. You want to give us a weather update where you are?
Thanks. Yeah, it's great to be here. This is only my second time on The View, and I'm very excited to join you. The weather here is hot, and we have like air quality, ozone warnings in various parts of the state today. And I think my technology is working fine, but when I look at how I'm looking on Facebook, I look blurry, but I tell you, I'm not as blurry in real life.
We guarantee you that those of us who've actually met Cindy in person know
my church sits on the land of Nipmuc, Pawtucket, Massachusetts, and Wampanoag people who occupied that land in we're kind of at a crossroads of where various tribal lands were.
Super. So, we wanted to talk about Article 2, because if you're paying attention in the Unitarian Universalist world, this is an issue right now. We have for, what's it been now, 5 years, been in a process to examine what is known as Article 2 of the UUI bylaws, the central part of which currently are our principles and our sources, but there are other things in Article 2 as well, which we don't need to spend a whole lot of time talking about. And we do this regularly. We're mandated to do it every 15 years, at least. So this is the annual 15-year regular review, but it was also triggered by the overwhelming vote on the proposed eighth principle, which triggers a review. The final vote is happening in about a month at the General Assembly of our association, and there is a whole lot of, to use an Aisha term, fuck shit going on about this, like misinformation and disinformation and anxiety and grief over the proposed changes, and people taking advantage of that anxiety and their grief for malicious and unnecessary things. And I don't want to spend too much time in the malicious and unnecessary things, but I do want to actually talk about what's being proposed and how it came to be. So, Cindy, do you want to tell us a little bit about the process that you've been involved in?
Yeah, so I was not part of the Article 2 Commission. I knew that this was vaguely happening, but I'm one of the people who wasn't paying a lot of attention until the first draft came out. And I think that, like a lot of people, I was kind of shocked. Like, what? You're taking away the entire principles? And so as more and more people kind of realize that this is happening and hear about it, I think we're getting that of reaction over and over and over and over again. And it makes it feel like the attitude out there is more negative than it is. What I'm seeing is just like Skip just Reinerson put a comment in the chat saying, the more and more I reflect on it, the more I read and hear perspectives on it, the more I'm falling in love. And that was really my process too, that my first reaction was like, what? No, I love the principles. And the more I reflected on it, the more I said, and it took for me making a PowerPoint where I put up the differences and looked at each principle and how and where it was reflected in the values statements that are proposed. And I saw, oh, inherent worth and dignity, it's over here. And oh, right of conscience, it's not in the values, but it's over here in this other section. And each principle is reflected in there, with the exception of the one on peace and world community. And so my of drafting a proposal for the GA to consider of whether or not we should add peace in as an additional value. And with all of it, my attitude is, this is about the will of the people, the will of the delegate bodies reflecting the will of the congregations, and it'll pass or it won't, but we should be kind and considerate to each other about the process. This is not something the UUA is imposing on us. It's something we get to vote on. And that's one of the things I love most about our democratic faith. The other thing I would say about that is, I've been talking to my congregation a lot about how, yes, the principles are a document that defines Unitarian Universalism, but they're not all of what defines my faith for me, and not all of what defines our congregation's understanding of Unitarian Universalism. We have a congregational covenant. We have a congregational mission statement. We have our own bylaws. And so I've said, if we decide that we miss the principles and we want them to be part of our congregation statement, we can vote as a congregation to have 7 or 8 principles as a congregation and put that into our own documents.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point. Aisha?
So what's coming up for me, to your point in the beginning, Michael, about the resistance is, because here's the thing, as a religious educator for 2 decades now, hear anybody like super defend the 7 principles or even know them like cold turkey, right? So, I mean, cold turkey, that doesn't make sense. I mean, know them like, from their back, like off the top of their head, right? What I think is happening, because we're a microcosm of the United States as a whole, the Unitarian Universalism. And I think given like all the other kind of social changes and everything that's happening in the last 10 years, I would say even, folks who found, however they connect in Unitarian Universalism, folks who are perceiving that the ways that Unitarian Universalism wants to be expansive and responsive to those who are part of this faith, youth, young adults, people of all ages, those who've kind of felt comfort in Unitarian Universalism being a certain way are the ones who are, many are frankly afraid of change. I had a woman tell me in her 70s, this was when I was still at a brick and mortar. It was one of the most, and honestly, it was an honest statement she made to me. This was right after the white supremacy teaching took off. I was at a brick and mortar, and she came up to me and said, I've been in my apartment building for 30 years. I used to know everyone. Now I don't know anyone who lives there anymore. Everything's changed. This is the one place that I don't want to change. And I had deep compassion and empathy for her. It was not, I was able to hear that because it wasn't, you're wrong. Why are you saying white supremacy? All lies. Like, it wasn't the usual tropes of kind of red herrings, really, right? It was a deep, vulnerable, this place is the one place where I am whole, I am accepted, I am known, I am affirmed. Don't change that. And it was when I realized, like, oh, there is a piece here of Unitarian Universalism. And here's where I guess we get a little more existential. I think where I think we're still is one of our growing edges is how to have people embody what it means to be Unitarian Universalist in ways that also include, yes, we're going to change things sometimes or transform or grow, but it doesn't mean you're not a Unitarian Universalist. And it doesn't mean Unitarian Universalism isn't the sacred community, sacred theology, sacred faith that it is. Does that make sense?
Oh, it totally does. And, what you said about resistance to change and feeling like I don't want my faith to change. It's this, island of stability for me is so important to hear and to really honor. One of the things I actually like about the value statements, and there's parts of it I disagree with and parts of it I like, but I was the same way about the principles. And so, but one of the things I like statements is that it has the value of transformation, and it speaks to change and says openness to change is fundamental to our Unitarian and Universalist heritages. And so while I understand that, like, I don't want it to
Or
change.
living tradition.
We are a living tradition. Yes. And I mean, the fact that we do change is so fundamental to who we are. And for me, this value of transformation connects to the work of Octavia Butler and, for her process theologians that says, God is change. And I think the values will help us with that change, will help us live into holding on, but loosening up with that fear of change.
It's so true. And, it's interesting. I have compassion for the person who didn't want their apartment building to change, right? Can have empathy. I can say that must be really hard for you, right? And at the same time, as new people move into your apartment building, maybe you should introduce yourself to them and get to know them. And that way you never live in a building of people that you don't know, because you're actually getting to know your neighbors. You're actually forming community, right? So I have empathy for people who are grieving principles that have meant a lot to them, right? I know people for whom walking into a Unitarian Universalist congregation and seeing the inherent worth and dignity of every person was life-saving.
Mm-hmm.
Like, saved their life at moments of great despair and depths of despair and oppression, right? Life-saving. And if you've been involved in the conversation for the last 30 years, right? I've been involved I've been a Unitarian Universalist since 1993. So that's 40 years now, almost. 30 years? I don't know. I can't count. 30 years. And so I've been involved in the conversation just as a layperson in my congregation. I was involved in the conversation, and then going to workshops and listening to people. So I know that, for example, the democratic process, and I put this in quotes for people who are listening on our podcast, the democratic process has been a problematic phrase in our principle since it was written, right? Because it implies that there's only one, and the one that we often choose is one that silences the voices of the marginalized in the name of majority voting. And two, it implies that there's only one, and the one that we pick is not a particularly good one, right? And so in the new proposed language, it uses the phrase inclusive democratic processes, right?
Yeah.
Which implies that there are more than one democratic process. There is more than one democratic process. And some of them are inclusive and some of them are not. And we have to do the work to figure out whether they're inclusive or not, right? I was not shocked by that change because I've been part of conversations for 30 years about democracy in our faith.
An exciting example of how we're doing democracy different this year at General Assembly is that we're having a progressive stack in our pro and cons. And did we have that last year? Is this our first year doing that? But
I think you had it last year.
we
Did
had
we
it
have
at UUMA for a few years, so I lost track. But that's a newer development to our democratic process. This is really exciting to see, and makes it a more, makes it a better system. But at the same time, Michael, I hear you saying, like, I've been involved in the discussions for 30 years, and I think that's one of the things is, like, I've been a UU since I was 5, but I was not involved in the conversation for many years. I didn't even know there was a General Assembly, I think, until I went to seminary. I mean, like, I probably knew that there was such a thing, but it never occurred to me that, like, I could go, and I never knew what was going on there. And so I think and there are a lot of UUs, particularly if you're in a congregation with a minister who's not as engaged, or a congregation without a minister, you might not be hearing about these larger conversations that have happened. And so for a lot of people, the question of why of the democratic process is coming as a surprise, or why do we not want the word worth that's coming as a surprise, or the other things, like what Sophia said recently about how the first principle is based in Kantianism. I think people are just now entering into this dialogue, and so we're having a learning curve as those of us who haven't been part of the conversation catch up and understand, oh, the principles, yeah, turns out they were really flawed and imperfect in lots of ways, and they were a product of their time.
And the values will also, in time, be seen as flawed and imperfect and a product of their time, right? If we pass them, right?
Yeah,
that's part of our transformation and change and ongoing growth, is that if we pass this proposal, in 30 years, we're going to look back and go, boy, that's really dated. That's really 2024. How 2024 of them.
Yes. Our colleague Fred Wooden just wrote a piece that he shared with me, and I think is going to be published really soon, that basically says that it's like, are these perfect? No, they're a product of our time. The time will tell what was wrong and what was right in them, but they don't. He had a really fabulous ending line. So when it comes out, go read Fred Wooden's piece, because it's like, basically, stay in this faith and work with it. The faith is not for it to, be perfect for me. It's for me to participate in it, but he better than that.
I think the way the discourse within Unitarian Universalism about this is happening, I mean, I definitely, to me, I think the changes have been, the way the commission went about this was super thoughtful, was really going out of their way to try to be inclusive. Was it perfect? No, because we're dismantling perfectionism here in these parts, right? But I think again, within the context of the United States, the idea that people are so angry that they're like, I'm going to leave Unitarian Universalism if you don't keep the 7 principles, and they don't even want the 8th principle, many of these folks, exactly the way they are, just speaks to how we've been socialized. And where, like, so because I'm an immigrant and I have a whole different frame of reference of socialization, which is not perfect by any stretch. However, one thing that my family that and maybe coming from Jersey too, not just, but like, conflict is part, like, my mother's one of 11 children, my dad's one of 10. So, like, drama is the name of the game in my extended family. And people didn't, like, leave because they got into an argument. You know what I mean? Like, there was an argument,
Yeah.
you worked it out, and then you had stuffed grape leaves and, whatever, what have you for dinner. Like, you know what I mean? So I think here in the United States, it is so about annihilation. It is so about winning and losing. It is so about, I'm right. And some versions of this are replicated over and over and over. And so there haven't been many places where it's happening now. It has been happening in, to some extent, in organizing spaces, and you see it on the encampments, how people are really, really working hard to be different, to show up differently, to navigate, because it is not easy to collaborate. It's not easy to work through nuance. But this whole, if we get rid of the principles, I'm not a UU, I'm leaving the entire, and I'm like, okay, but to what end? Okay, obviously that is a choice you can have, but like, it speaks volumes to the inability to sit in discomfort and negotiate and be nuanced. But this culture, the United States, is so into annihilation that this plays out in this discourse too.
You know, something in there you were saying about people saying, oh, this isn't what I'm here for, I'm leaving, take my cards and go home. I think that some of that goes back to, you know, our Emersonian individualism and self-reliance, but also the fact that we're such a religion made up of so many people who have left other places. And so we've got the come-inners, many of whom left a church because of the way it was broken and hurt them, and for good reasons a lot of times. I mean, the church not accepting people who are LGBTQ, that's a reason to leave for sure, but it doesn't train us well in how to stay with the disagreements and live in a space where I might be the minority point of view, but this is still my faith. And I think it's an exercise in learning the life of religion, the life of a church, to say, though it's broken my heart 1,000 times, I'm going to keep coming. And so this is kind of that exercise right now in a big scale for us to say, yeah, even if I don't love this, I'm going to stick with it because I love this faith, and this faith is bigger than any one document, statement in bylaws.
And
Amen.
if I might, I'd like to apologize, because I didn't mean to say that you had to be part of the conversation for 30 years, because not all of us have been Unitarian long. But when I say I've noticed that conversation happening for 30 years,
yeah,
the response should be, oh, tell me more.
Yeah.
Right? The conversation about love not being in our principles has been happening for at least 25 years. Since Bill Sinkford was elected in 2001. At least that long, maybe longer. I don't know. That's when I became aware of it, right? That the word love is not in our principles.
And that's in this whole thing, because when the Article 2 thing came out, and I had lots of questions. Why is this the case? What was wrong with the principles? Like, what are people responding to? Why do we change this? And so I started asking the questions. I had a lot of conversations with DC actually about hey, what? And DC would say, here's a thing about democracy. And I was like, oh, okay, now I get that. And so for me, but so many times this faith has been a learning curve for me, where I realized I'm having a reaction to something. That means I need to go learn more to understand why our faith is making the choices it has. And every single time that has happened, I have grown and learned from the ways in which I was feeling disagreement with our faith. And I've discovered I'm not always right. This faith isn't always right, but I still have a lot to learn.
Thank you. Yeah, Cynthia Townsend in our comments on YouTube says, I believe they're frightened that they will no longer be able to weaponize the 7 principles, which is a really interesting perspective too. And I've seen that happen too. I mean, how many times have you been in a space where the right of conscience was used as a backup for, I can hold on to this racist belief if I want to, because I have the right of conscience in this space. And I say racist because I've seen it weaponized in exactly that way, right? And I imagine, Aisha, in your work on the white supremacy teaching, the right of conscience was thrown at you.
I mean, yeah. And even the inherent worth and dignity. And I was never a fan of that one, only because the way it had been used, I experienced it being used is, I have inherent worth, and therefore it fill in the blank of some, value that is counter to what I understand Unitarian Universalism to be. Therefore, the big one was years ago, way before COVID, maybe, I can't pick a year, but many years ago, way before COVID. There was when we were still using email listservs, there was a whole thing on the Laredo listserv, the Liberal Religious Educators Association listserv, about vaccines.
Mm.
And I was
Mm.
like, it's selfish and terrible not to vaccinate. And when I tell you the people came at me, and it was, I have inherent worth and dignity, and you're not respecting me. And I'm like, my sister died at 4 weeks old from viral meningitis, which you can now get vaccinated for. So coming from Egypt, where vaccines were, I mean, blah, 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 fill in the blank. But the first principle was used. And I'm like, and I
Yikes.
mean, yikes. So it's not just right of conscience. You can, and here's the thing about, oh, bless us, humanity. We can weaponize anything. I do workshops on empathy, and somebody's like, empathy sucks, and here's why. Like, I mean, we know how to weaponize it. Here's the thing, and I don't have an answer to what I'm about to say. It's kind of been a live question for me. Both as I'm a trained social worker and a faith leader, is so the United States, we're so close to, we could be cool if we weren't terrible, but how do we engage people, create containers of, we do belong to each other. There is an interdependent web. It is not an even web. It is not a just web. That is all true. It is not equitable, true, but we're still connected. What is happening in Haiti, in Congo, in Sudan, in Palestine impacts all of us, whether we pretend to know that it's happening or not. And so how do we have this pluralist faith that is Unitarian Universalism, the faith that we love, that says we are, interpret it as you will. We come from one source. We are all loved. We are all worthy. How do we make space for people who are like, to your point, I'm one of the people who left Islam. I grew up strict Muslim. My mother disowned me for 16 years, came back into my life. She re-owned me. And we have a neutral truce about religion. We just don't talk about it. So I'm one of those people. And I fiercely, because I left a faith that is dear to my entire family, I love this one. I love Unitarian Universalism, and I won't let the people who've hurt me in it define how I interpret it and how I live it out. But how do we create the containers is my question to you both. I mean, you're both ministers. How do we create the container that models for people, this is hard, don't be mean to each other, we still can have boundaries, and we can be uncomfortable and navigate through the fear of not belonging, the fear of not being included, because in a primal level, that fear is one that says, I'm going to die if I'm not included.
Mm.
Mm. Mm.
Well,
Too big a question for me right now.
To me, it goes back to that
That's,
theology part, right?
Yeah.
Cindy, I didn't mean to interrupt you. We're having technical.
No, I said it's too big a question for me right now. You take it, Michael.
Well, I'm not going to answer the question. I can't answer the question, but for me, I will use an I statement. I believe it goes back to the theology that is driving us, right? And if we believe that love is at the center, then we are committing ourselves to doing the hard work of love, right? And if we believe that God is change, and I love that Octavia Butler gets credit for 100 years of process theology, but they are all like dead white guys, and so I'm willing to give Octavia Butler the credit. But if we believe that God is change, because we are constantly in a process of becoming something new, right? That's what process theology says. We are constantly in a process of becoming something new. Then the container has to be, what are you becoming next? Let us support you in becoming that next thing, right? Let us support you in developing the relationships that you need to become something better, something, because you're going to become something new, whether it's better or not.
One of the things I say about this, one of the things I say about this change from principles to values is that, and I don't know if the container metaphor works so much for this, but that it's, what is it calling us to? And the principles are calling us as congregations to affirm and promote. That's pretty milquetoast. Like, we're affirming things, we're promoting things, but we're not actively working for change. And one of the things, like, one of the most important principles to me has always been the seventh one, the inherent worth, the respect for the independent web of life. And it's the verb there is respect. And what I see the young people in my congregation is, when we say, what do you want to do Youth Sunday on? What's like a pressing issue for you? It's climate change. Climate change won the vote years in a row. And they will point to our principle, but all our principle says is respect. What we are given with these new values is a depth of change in the interdependence one, that it's like we're covenanting to cherish, and we are acknowledging our place, but we work to repair harm. And we understand interdependence,
right?
and work to, yeah. So that there's a different level of commitment to the earth and a different understanding in this principle, in this value. And I mean, value and principle are synonymous to me, really, but there's a different level of commitment and understanding. It isn't just like we're gonna work to shout emissions, but that it's intersectional. So when it says we're going to work to repair harm and damaged relationships, we have to do all of this justice work together, or we're not going to save our earth. And it's so much more robust for us to engage.
Yeah, I mean, it's yes, everything, you both are saying, it's so, important. And I think the thing that I wonder is where the modeling is for us to model for the folks who come into our spaces, who are part of who we are. I don't even mean come in, but like Unitarian Universalists, wherever, and we, at the CLF, we have no geographical boundaries. We're not a brick and mortar. And so in what ways, and again, this is an open question. It's not a question that I try. I'm like, okay, in what ways am I modeling what it is that I want to see in the world? And, and that includes like, it's not even about making mistakes. It's about like when, okay, something happened or went a certain way. I mean, Michael knows very, very well, like I'm constantly like, okay, sorry, my bad. I did this thing, or I said this thing. And it's me being, when we show up authentically, we are going to flub it sometimes. We are going to not be our best selves. We are going to act out. Like one day I something happened and Mike reached out to me. I'm like, I'm just mad at everything. I'm just mad at everything. Like since I mean, it's true. I'm like, there have been days where I'm just like, I'm angry at everything. I need to go. Well, I've started running again. I mean, I'm not even a runner, but anyway, I'm like, I need to do something with all this energy that is so unsettling, because we're failing our children. There is no such thing as other people's children. I heard it somewhere many years ago and I've used it since, but like, we are failing them. They are saying to us, save the one planet that you all got to benefit from. We still get to breathe the air. We still have water. And we're saying to them, yeah, but the fucking stock market. Yeah, but XYZ. Yeah, but. And then they're saying, stop the genocide. Yeah, but. And I'm like, our children, our young people are saying to us, help us do this thing. And in the United States, where we are the superpower of the world, and not for good. I mean, we're an imperial, we all know. I mean, blah, blah, blah. Google it. America, imperialist nation. And so we do have a huge impact. That's the macro. On the micro level, Unitarian Universalism, when we did it with marriage equality, I mean, we can make an impact. Like we've done it. We know how to do that. And so when we're together and not even able to get to where we're having people like, again, it goes back to, I don't know. I mean, I don't know where the modeling is or how we make space for it, but I do think it's part of our mandate. And I want to give kudos to Reverend Dr. Sophia Betancourt, UUA president, who I think is really trying. I feel from her and her administration, ways that they're trying to do that. Oh, Cindy, come back. Did you lose Cindy? I lost. Oh, there you are. Okay. Anyway.
I said,
Hi.
but it's actually Nelson.
Oh, you're forgetting the storms.
So,
Anyway,
Cindy,
so I'm just going. Yeah, I'm just going
so
down
Cindy,
around.
while we have you back,
Yes.
I want to discuss the amendments. I want to bring it back to Article 2. Whoop. We got out into like these big theological questions. Whoop, back to Article 2. The amendments and actions of immediate witness, because we have 15 minutes left. So there are 4 amendments that we will be debating and voting on.
There are amendments. How I summarize them is there's one equity amendment that's about just beautifying language. It deals with that fact that like the word worth, but the word worthy a little clunk. It goes to reword it instead, and I think that's a pretty non-controversial thing. It's not trying to change the meaning of the value. It's just trying to beautify. Another equity amendment, which is a little more at the fact that the equity value is kind of the shortest one right now and it balances it out by adding an additional sentence. And I don't remember the language of that sentence. Making it a bigger amendment, it's a value. And then there are 2 amendments to add entire new petals to our values. One is to add peace. If you look through and do an analysis of how the principles are embedded, really still there. We're not losing our principles because we're carrying our principles through to the values. But the one that isn't really carried through is that the word peace, we have the value of peace and world and the phrase world community both do not appear in value statements. So this one wants to add that. That's one my congregation has been very involved with because we have a weekly peace vigil and have had it since and 3, like 20 peace vigil every week in front of our church. So for a lot of people, they think peace needs to be there. I think that's going to be a really robust debate. I think that around because there's also problems there, which is around the question of, does peace mean shush up and don't fuss when you have differences of opinion? Is that what peace means? So I think having adding reason as a whole petal, and I think this is for our sort of humanist core that really like that's what they want is logic and reason in this faith. And even though that principle is pulled out whole separate petal, the problem with it for me is then we do have redundancy because it is in there already. So I would have liked to see it both add and then delete over here. So that's my issue debate. And I think there's like 15 minutes for each amendment. It's going to start with the person who proposed it, giving their summary of it. And then progressive stack. So the first 2 pros and cons people in the progressive stack. With my other hat on, I'm just really excited because I did a lot of work on fat liberation last year. And I'm really excited to see in the language of who could be in the progressive stack, it includes fat. So that was that as a liberation issue, as a justice issue that I was really excited to see in this year's rules of procedure, which have been posted, so you can read those now. And so we'll wait. It added. The nice thing is one of the changes they to the Article 2 proposal is that the graphic can get amended by the board at any time. So if people are asking what happened to that graphic, have more things added, well, that's adaptable. So actions of immediate witness, I'll tell you quickly, right now you have a window where you can still submit actions of immediate witness. It's like 3 more days. The deadline is cut off, and the only way if something like big happens in the world, another war breaks out, and you need to respond to it. Other than that, you can't submit them after the 26th. We have an earlier deadline where the Commission on Social Witnesses feedback, and we've been giving the feedback to the 4. There's 4 that have been submitted. What happens then after they're all submitted is the Commission on Social Witness said these meet the criteria, so we put them out there for a vote for and I believe that vote happens prior to GA, so keep an eye out for when that vote is, but it'll be prior to GA. I believe that we will narrow it down to 3. We preliminary vote, place them on the final agenda, and then once those 3 are on the final agenda, they each get 15 minutes of debate where people talk about the pros and cons of them, and we do an upper. You're going to have one about Gaza. Yes, you are going to have one about Gaza. That is absolutely, we've had one submitted. It meets our criteria. We've already said to them, you've met our criteria, or if we haven't, that email that says they've met forward. They have some time to amend some language if they want to, but we will be seeing that as one of the 3 or 4 or more that are going to be on your poll to vote on.
And we will probably have on a future VUU the people proposing that particular action of immediate witness on Gaza, because one of them is our friend Christina Rivera. So, so we're biased here.
Another one that we can after we know a little bit more about which ones are going forward, we can hook you up with all of the presenters to have them on the VUU if you'd be interested. Like, that's something the CSW, I'm speaking for all of us, to do with to publicize these. That would be great.
That'd be sweet. We love the Commission on Social Witness, who tries really hard and navigates arcane, complex bylaws and things.
I got on the Commission on Social Witness.
Arcane.
Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I got on the Commission on Social Witness because they were saying at a previous GA away with the action of immediate witness process. In this long email saying why I, as a minister, value the AIW process, because ministers are often taught that you can't say anything unless your congregation has, you can't self to the press and out in the sphere. So what I've always done is ground my statements in Unitarian Universalist statements, and to say Unitarian Universalism, even if my congregation Universalism has voted to support gay marriage when we were in the gay marriage fight. That allows me to ground the statements, and in my sermons I do the same thing. Like the UUA General Assembly has passed, and for that so hard, then go be on the CSW. Then after they got my email, They were like, okay, you're coming on. So they recommended to the nominating committee to put me on based on my complaints to them.
I love it.
And it's nice when someone has a constructive piece of feedback and they're invited into the process.
Yeah.
Right?
It's really true.
Well, what would our faith be without actions of immediate witness? I mean, let's be real. Like this, the whole, to me, it's faith in action. I mean, otherwise we're a thought, a thought experiment. Like, come on, folks. That's part of us being responsive to what's happening in the world around us. We're not a country club. Can I tell you, I said a country that a congregation I worked for, I served, was a country club, and a white woman said to me, "That's a microaggression." I said, "It is in fact not."
Yeah.
She said it was I said, no, that word does not mean what you think it means.
Oh my!
You for saving actions of immediate witness.
Yay! Yeah, we're working to bring back the statement of conscience process, but the deadlines that are like to have things proposed by fall for study action issues, and so we needed more time together as a team to be able to revive that process. But we're hoping in the future to revive those too.
And maybe someday we'll learn that you shouldn't put deadlines into the bylaws that can only be amended by the General Assembly.
Right.
right?
Arcane. That was the right word, arcane.
The board shall make policies regarding.
Yes.
Is what belongs in the bylaws, and then the board can pass what the deadlines should be. It's
Bylaws committee, are you listening?
Rob Spirko, member of the Article 2 Commission, says amen. So we're
in all caps. In shouty caps.
In shouty caps. Amen. Amen, says Rob. There we go. We're glad you're with us today, Rob.
Yeah.
So Cindy, we have like 5 minutes left. Any other nuggets of inspiration and wisdom you want to leave us with about Article 2 or anything else?
Yeah, here's something that'll be news. I'm working with a public letter to Unitarian Universalists. This is not one just for clergy to sign on to. This is one for, all religious professionals and all laity to sign on to this Article 2 vote. Respect for each other and stop the name calling and stop the vitriol flinging and excrement flinging at each other. And remember that it's way. This is a vote that we can do so with respect for our leaders and respect for each other, that we are all Unitarian Universalists coming to the table together in this, whether you're for it or against it, and behave better and behave in a way that our faith, that's recognizing that we are people of faith together. So that's a public letter that I and some others are putting out in the next. Just kind of say, let's tone here, folks, at the table together.
Yeah.
Yes.
Maybe we can stop calling the president of the UUA hideous names.
Yeah, even hideous, but that are, snide and sarcastic and full of vitriol, like Queen Sophia, right? Like, that's not necessary. And it's, if you disagree last year, you can say that was not Sophia's fault. Take it up with the committee and voice your disagreement to them, to the nominating committee. But Sophia went through everything she could to make there was a vote, and that she did been a contested election of having those, debate times and going through the whole campaign procedures. She deserves our respect, and she's leading us through at the helm. She's back. Be professional here.
Yeah, and whether or not the values and covenant pass, whether or not the new Article 2 passes, we can all behave as if love were at the center of our faith.
Yes.
When it comes to each other and when it comes to our processes. I'm going to take it as I might just get the flower tattooed on my arm, whether or not it passes. That will not be my first tattoo, believe me.
Oh, here's one, like how we can keep on with these values if we want to. Let me tell you, my music director, Chris Hosfeld, I'm going to drop a line for him. He has written a fabulous Jet Pigs. Take it and use it. It's available publicly. We can still enjoy these values if it passes or not.
And I do want to say, in our closing minute, we had a show on Jet Pig. Look for it in our archive. It was fun and fabulous. We had a pig guest, in addition to some non-porcine guests. And we've had many shows in the last 4 years with the Article 2 Commission, who have been generous with their time in coming on the show and discussing this process that has been going on for now 5 years. They've been impaneled for 4 of those years. And so look in our archive on YouTube, in the VUU archive, and go back and watch some of those shows if you want to learn more about how this process has unfolded since 2019.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Cindy. It has been a pleasure. We hope that you'll come back and discuss other fun and fabulous things with us, maybe someday when none of us are having thunderstorms.
Yes. Thank you, Cindy. This was super fun.
Thank you. I had a lot of fun.
And thank you, everybody.
Thank you for joining us. Special thanks to those of you who give generously to this ministry. It is because of you that this ministry is possible. You can click the link in the description to give now, or visit clfuu.org/give for more information. We hope you will join us next week for another episode of The VUU.